one or two additional panelists in who are working on their links right now, but in deference to everybody's time, I'm going to turn it over to the incoming chair of NVCT's board, Ranjit Singh, to get us kicked off here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Ranjit Singh, and as Alan said, I'm the incoming chair of the board of directors of the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you from my office in Fredericksburg. On behalf of our board, I would like to welcome our state senators and delegates who have generously made time to serve on today's panel, as well as the many of you who have joined this virtual event. Thank you. You know, growing up on our family farm in Stafford County, we didn't really think too much about how what we did affected the land and water. As kids, we fished for herring in Potomac Creek and saw the waters and woods around us as pretty much infinite resources. Now, all of you gathered today know so much more than we did then. As concern for the environment and interest in land conservation soars among our region's residents, I am extremely proud of the leadership role the NVCT has played for more than 25 years. I'd like to take this moment to thank each board member and staff for being champions of the trust and for conservation. At NVCT, we don't just conserve a lot of land, over 8,000 acres so far. We also play a vital part in improving public understanding of conservation and its benefits for the communities we serve, and in producing events like today's, where people like you can hear from and ask questions of our elected representatives and learn their views on how land and water policies will shape our region's future. So thank you all for your interest in conservation and our region's environment. I will now turn the mouse over to NVCT Executive Director, Alan Rowsome.
Thanks, Ranjit. Appreciate that, and welcome everyone. Welcome to our panelists. Northern Virginia Conservation Trust is the regional land trust serving Northern Virginia, and we've done so for the last 27 years. We've protected over 8,000 acres of land in very urban and suburban region, primarily using conservation easements and the state's land preservation tax credit. And we're looking forward to getting into some conversation about each. I want to thank the board of NVCT for their leadership and for our staff. No events like these are ever put together without great staff, and we are blessed to have an incredible team, so I thank them. I also want to thank our sponsors today, the White House Farm Foundation, Legal Perspectives LLC, and Gary and Vicki Kirkbride. Normally, we are at an in-person event right now that NVCT has over the years held as a luncheon or an evening reception to highlight conservation champions and to give people an opportunity to meet together to discuss issues of the day and learn more about how we can better work together. And it's disappointing that we are not able to be together. The pandemic has been tough on everyone, and it feels so good to be seemingly seeing the light at the end of that tunnel. And we hope to bring that event back to you next year. I think it's unquestioned that during this time, during this pandemic time, our parks and natural areas have been so critical to our mental and physical well-being. And as the world gets back to whatever our new normal is going to be, it's really important to remember that we need to invest in and increase accessibility to our outdoor places that have been so used and so loved during this past year. We're really pleased to be joined today by so many incredible leaders in our communities who believe, as we all do, that protecting nature and the outdoors is so critical to our region's health and to the constituents they serve. For so many years moving forward, a proactive land conservation climate change agenda really wasn't possible in the State Assembly, but in the last 2 years, we've made many strides thanks to these leaders. We've significantly increased funding for the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation and for trails. We've enhanced wildlife corridors to ensure habitat connectivity. We've ensured the integrity of conservation easements when they're legally challenged. We've funded agricultural best management practices to improve water quality while supporting productive farmland. We've passed legislation to study ways to reduce or prohibit the sale of invasive species in our region. We've protected and built on the land preservation tax credit by including a pre-application round that is showing a huge demand for acquisition dollars. And we've passed heirs property legislation that ensures generational, often minority landowners are able to keep property in their family. Those are significant successes. The panelists we're about to hear from made that happen. Their leadership as patrons of these bills and sitting on key committees to move that legislation was instrumental in their passage and adoption. Moving forward, we need to build on that and do so much more. Climate change is real and its effects are being felt in our region already. Sea level rise, agricultural uncertainty, severe weather, and a huge increase in invasive plants and animal species are all threatening the advances we've made and our progress ahead. We're also seeing huge demographic shifts in our region that demand that we are inclusive of all people. Northern Virginia is soon to be, if not already, a majority minority region, and we need to work intentionally to make sure we listen to and act on the needs of all of our area residents. It's exciting as well that the new administration in Washington sees these challenges and is building a blueprint to meet them, moving forward boldly to address climate change in ways that meet the existential environmental threat of our time. So this is a critical moment to harness that energy through policy solutions at the state and local level. And getting behind an initiative to protect 30% of our nation's land and waters by 2030, the administration is staking its reputation and our environmental future on all of us on this call today to act and take initiative. Private land conservation is acknowledged as the most critical aspect of this initiative. Hence why we're here today, talking with these change makers in our state assembly who care so much about our region's future. We're lucky to have them representing us in Richmond and to have them with us today. With that, I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves to us today as they answer a first question. For all of our attendees, if you'd like to ask a question of our panelists, please use the Q&A feature within Zoom and we will get to as many as we can throughout the discussion. Delegate Cole, if you've joined us, I'm going to start with you. You have an incredible district with outdoor resources that includes the Crow's Nest Natural Area Preserve and the Rappahannock River, but also have significant growing urban areas with development pressure. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about why land conservation is important to you, and as a relatively new member of the General Assembly, how you're hoping to continue to be a leader on that issue moving forward.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And Alan, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here just to chat a little bit. And it's great to see Dr. Singh as well. This is, we're looking at one of the things of maintaining growth and also how we can protect our environment and land conservation. I know predecessors before me, that was a great thing. You know, that's not a partisan issue. So the predecessors before me who came from another side, they always championed land preservation as well. We have Crow's Nest, as you mentioned. We have the Rappahannock River, which we just passed a bill making that a scenic river, designating that as a scenic river. What's going to be key moving forward is we have great pieces of land in what we call the rural parts of Stafford County that have not been approached upon yet by growth and building developments. And I think it's going to be key for us to understand we still need to protect those spaces.
Did we lose the congressman?
Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
I'm Southwest Virginia, so the reception is spotty down here.
Yep.
As moving and as we're growing, we do have to make sure that we're keeping those spaces. And I think Stafford County is doing a great job. But we just want to make sure that throughout the state, we have leading voices that can help carry that values and that mission all throughout the state as well.
Great. Senator Marsden, welcome to you as well. I'm going to turn to you next. As a leader on the Senate Natural Resources Committee, the Finance Committee, and now a board member of the Virginia Land Conservation Foundation, I'm interested in why this issue is so important to you. You've been a champion for wildlife corridors, And so would love to hear from you why this is a passionate issue for you, and what you think we can be doing moving forward to enhance Northern Virginia's communities. I think you're on mute, sir.
There we go. It is, thank you all very much for having me here today. One of my other duties, or one of my duties on the Finance Committee, is chairing the Economic Development and Natural Resources Committee, where we dealt this year with the return of property to a Native American tribe to have the land come back under their control. It was a little bit tricky, but we got it done. Clearly, the reason to begin to preserve land is in its natural state is that we're going to see more and more competition around the need for siting solar projects throughout the Commonwealth, and and the needs of agriculture and the needs of keeping our forests intact. We're going to see this competition develop. So the more that we can continue to preserve, especially near our water resources, like our rivers and streams and the bay, we get another bang for the buck. We protect our water at the same time we're preserving land. And at the same time, I'm working right now on trying to get a trail connected through Great Falls Park for bikers and hikers, so that people can use our protected land, and our land that is going to have its trees intact and its streams clean. And so there's a number of projects I'm working on. One of the other things that has occurred to me is there was a bill that I introduced this year to up local government's ability to restore the canopy of trees after development, and to move up the time frame, which means planting more and perhaps larger trees. But also, we're doing a study this year and also looking at the idea that if you can't reasonably replace what you've lost in terms of construction, that you can do an offset in another part of the state, perhaps along a stream in the Commonwealth, where you replace multiples of the trees you've taken down. That will not only make our air cleaner and work towards sequestering carbon, but also protecting our water resources from nitrogen pollution by making sure we have riparian boundaries in place. So this is an exciting time, but there is competition out there for how this land is to be used, and it's going to be up to us to make sure that we hold the line on making sure that we can do all three of those necessary things for our environment and our future, and that's going to require just a tremendous amount of work, and the needs and the input of folks like you who can help guide us in helping to make these decisions.
I appreciate that. I'm going to move on to Senator Survell and Delegate Krizak. I'm going to let you, answer. I'll let Senator Survell start, but both of you have districts where the Potomac River is such an important feature, and you understand that resource well. We've all been working together extremely closely, on the protection of a place like River Farm, as an example. And I'd love to hear from you both why it matters to protect River Farm, a place like that, and for your constituents, how important the Potomac is and its health is to, making sure that we, that our communities and that your constituents have that resource.
Paul, you want me to go first? I'm gonna go first.
Yeah, he asked. Alan said for you to go first, but I'm
okay.
Either way.
Well, Alan, first of all, thank you for all that you all do to keep to promote conservation in Northern Virginia and keep our important natural resources and historical resources available for the future in perpetuity. You all are a critical part of that. The way I come at these issues is, a lot of folks who live in the areas that I represent with Delegate Krizak also Delegate Tran, Delegate Cole, a little bit Delegate Guzman. She has some people that venture over to the river as well, over where I represent. People live in our part of the county because they enjoy that open space. They enjoy the river. They enjoy the parks. The district that I have that runs from the Wilson Bridge down to the end of the hot lanes, I have 3 state parks, 2 federal wildlife refuges, 2 national parks, a BLM recreation area, and the largest park in Fairfax County, plus 70 linear miles of riverfront. And people move there because they want to be able to enjoy all that, right? And River Farm is a small piece of that, but it's a very important, significant, and big, unique piece of it, because it intermixes both a conservation element, but also history. And when you go River Farm and you stand on that hill and you look out over the Potomac, and you can see for miles north and south, and see that vista, and realize that you're looking at nearly the same view that General George Washington might have looked at 200 some years ago. It's really an inspiring place to be. In fact, it's so inspiring, it inspired my wife to demand we get married there. So, but the property itself, dates back to George Washington's personal secretary, Tobias Lear, who George Washington gifted a life estate in the property to. It was owned before that by a man named William Clifton, who was one of the early settlers in Fairfax County. And when that property came under threat, our community's hair just caught on fire. That they were terrified that type of asset would fall into private hands, to where it would could be exclusively enjoyed by somebody who had the money to enjoy it, or the tens of millions of dollars it would take to buy it to enjoy it, which is sort of, I think, kind of offensive. And so everybody in Northern Virginia, I think, enjoys these assets along the Potomac. There for everybody, and doing all we can to promote them and keep them open to the public is absolutely critical to ensuring our continued way of life, and what we and the types of assets that we like to enjoy as citizens in Northern Virginia. And it's for everybody. I mean, I'll go out and I'll go on the river on my snakehead trips with the Department of Game and Fisheries, and I can't tell you how many people I see out there trying to catch dinner on the shoreline. I mean, it's not just, we're not just talking about the wealthy. It's everybody who gets out there and enjoys these resources.
Great, thank you, Delegate Krizek. You may have birds right behind you as you're speaking, so it's good to see.
Got a lot of goldfinches today. So I'm here in Holland Hills, right in the middle of the 44th district where I grew up, and we live in glass houses, as you can kind of see here in the trees. My wife called it a tree house when we first moved in, and it is, it's a part of our way of life here in Mount Vernon area is appreciating and loving nature. I went to Burgundy Farm Elementary School over in Franconia and off the Beltway, and it's a nature school. We all learned to identify trees and birds before we learned how to read and write. So it's and we had most of our classrooms were outside. So I've been a unrepentant environmentalist and tree hugger all my life. And if it was up to me, we would all we'd be planting trees 24/7 to get our tree canopy back to where it should be. But I agree with Senator Serval. I mean, when you go out to River Farm, it is a jewel. It really is. It's the community without question. The loss of that property as a devastating loss, and it really kind of represents all of the infill that we've been putting up with for many years, and that's really for us in the kind of inner suburbs right outside the Beltway is our biggest challenge as we, especially in this Mount Vernon area, because we are the oldest part of Fairfax County. We were the area that was developed first, and we've got a lot of old sewer systems, and we have water. We have a lot of water problems, and a lot of our creeks are falling apart. And we're getting with climate change, we're getting bigger downpours that are having a bigger impact, and it's not just the coastline along the beautiful Potomac River, which most of it is on private land. So River Farm, you lose that, you lose that beautiful access that we all have, and many many people have been married there, including Senator Sergel and his wife, and my brother, in fact, was married there too. And there's lots of nonprofits that do events there. It's just a fabulous place. They even have a big banana tree area that survives. They've got these banana trees that survive our cold weather. It's pretty neat to go back in there and walk around. And there's some trees there that are one of a kind. A few very, very old trees as well. And even without the historic property, involvement of George Washington, I think just on its own merits as a beautiful piece of property overlooking the Potomac River, and with all of the different meadows and trees and things there, just on those merits alone, it needs to be protected. If you couple that with its historic, pricelessness, if you will, then it should be a no-brainer. And I really appreciate your efforts, Alan and Ranjit, and what you guys are doing in NVCT. And that, we're right now hopefully in the home stretch. And I want to thank Senator Sergel especially for his leadership on this too. But another thing that, that you can really tell when you come to Mount Vernon why we have so many environmentalists, because we have so many, as the senator said, we have so many parks. My district is between the Potomac River and Huntley Meadows, which was a land that was given to the county, I think, for $1 back in the during the Nixon administration. It was surplus land. It was a great thing that President Nixon and his administration did. And since then there's been more land acquired. I think Ducks Unlimited back in the 90s helped to buy some more land. And it's a pity we couldn't have expanded it more before it started getting built up around it, because you don't realize how small these parks are until the infill kind of reaches their outer boundaries. And so one of the things I'd like to try to do, and let me just say that, so these creeks from Huntley Meadows, the creek goes from there all the way into the Potomac, of course. And one of the things you'll notice about this community, more so than any that I'm bragging on my community more so than my fellow delegates and senators on here, but we have an amazing creek cleanups. And Senator Sergel has been doing it for maybe a decade, and we had a couple hundred young people and older people cleaning up, and during in April and Earth Day cleanups, and just doing an incredible job. And the trash is one of the things I've been working on in the General Assembly is the litter problem, and I've worked with a lot of my colleagues on here, and we need to continue to address that as well. And I was happy to see that Roanoke is taking us up on one of the bills we passed on this last session, allowing for a plastic bag tax. So I think that if more jurisdictions will do that, that will help a little bit in the litter issue. But it is just an amazing area to live in. We're very excited to be here and to help save River Farm, but also to do, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, to work on trying to bring more money, not just for one-off situations like River Farm, but to support the Virginia Land Conservation Fund. I think we doubled that amount, the existing appropriation. I think we're up to about $10 million. I would love to see that grow even more. We have a farmland preservation fund. We have a battlefield preservation fund. And Alan, you mentioned the land preservation tax credit. Since 2000, that program has protected almost 1 million acres with an appraised value of about $4.5 billion. So that's an amazing success, but we need to do so much more. But the big issue for me going forward is micro parks, small 2, 3, 4 acre parks, and that are very expensive because the land value is very expensive up here. But we need to figure out a way, and I want to work with all mine, challenge my colleagues on this program here to help me and help to do something to preserve the small, even 1 acre, half an acre pieces of land that can be protected as preserved as little parks. especially the ones along little creeks and things like that, which we have plenty of. So that's really the one of my goals. But unfortunately, I'm not on any of the committees to work on that. But so I will work with my colleagues and together, and we will make this happen. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, appreciate you being here. Next question is for Delegates Tran and Bulova, and Delegate Tran, I'll start with you. I mean, you're both members of the Natural Resources Committee with districts theoretically, you know, in suburban Fairfax County. Delegate Tran, you have Mason Neck and Pohick Bay and some incredible resources in your district. And you're both strong environmental champions who have patroned and led significant environmental efforts. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of your favorite places to enjoy in the outdoors in your district, and really how you're working and how we can work to balance, you know, the development pressures and conservation in our fast growing region, but specifically in your districts.
I can go. Do you want me to go first, Alan?
Yes, please do.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Tran. I represent the 42nd District. So it's parts of Southeast Southern Fairfax County. And I cross over with Senator Suravel, and I'm just a little bit south of Delegate Paul Krzyk. But I, too, am on the Potomac when you mentioned that earlier. But so parts of my district are bordered by the Potomac and the Occoquan rivers. And so we have a lot of green space in the 42nd District, considering how close we are to, considering we're just in Northern Virginia and how close we are to this Washington, D.C. But I have Mason Neck State Park, which I think is the northernmost Virginia State Park, as well as 4 big regional parks in the Nova Regional Park System. I'm so sorry. There's not an earthquake in my house, but the baby is moving the table, so everything is shaking. He's crawling around. I'll hold the computer. And then we have lots of Fairfax County parks as well. So just a tremendous amount of green space. And for me, it's just been really gratifying to represent the 42nd District. When we took our first family hike in 2009, after we had our eldest son, we actually went to Mason Neck, and that's where we saw our first bald eagles flying in the air. And so it's just, I feel like we've come full circle. I'm so sorry. Would you help me? He's like gonna make this table fall on top of his head. It's just been so gratifying to, I feel like coming full circle and representing the community now. But because we have so much incredible waterway, I do want to just highlight a couple of things. The importance of making sure that our waterways, we keep them healthy, right? It is not just an issue of allowing for safe recreation, and so many people depend upon our waterways for their livelihoods, but it is also a matter of public health and preserving biodiversity. And so I had a bill that passed in 2020, working with Delegate Lopez, to make sure that the Department of Environmental Quality let us know when there's noxious substances are spilled in our public waterways, and we've strengthened that notification process, and we're going to continue working on this issue as they look at additional ways for improving that process. So hopefully we'll have some more work for next year on that issue. I just want to put a plug in that. And then the second part I just want to talk about is, I think the importance of having continued conversations around why it's important to preserve our green space. And that education piece is really important, particularly being in this area where, as my colleagues have spoken about, there's this tension between expansion and accessibility, as well as making sure that we, take care of our planet and take care of our environment. I had an Earth Day town hall this year, and I think sometimes we don't pause as often for Earth Day anymore, but we had a great town hall. We featured the state park, we featured Nova Regional Parks, we talked about, we also brought in the Bureau of Land Management because they have space out on the neck as well, and talked about some of our legislative wins. And I got some really good feedback from my constituents in terms of how do we make sure we continue to have this conversation and this education and outreach effort, so that people understand what's at stake when we sway too much towards meeting the demands of development. But I thought that was so I hope to continue to have that conversation with my constituents. I know it's a big issue for folks in the 42nd. Thank you.
Great. Delegate Bulova.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan. And it's wonderful to be here. We're a little distracted at the Bulova household because the cicadas came out last night. And so took my 13-year-old out there to watch all these guys crawling out of the ground. So it's been pretty tremendous. But I do want to thank the Conservation Trust for putting this on today, and have really long valued, what you have done for Northern Virginia, and appreciate working with you all over the many years, beginning from when I was first elected to the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Board back in 2003. And so really do love the theme of today, because anything that we do on the land is integrally related to what happens in the water and what happens in the air. And I think what's neat about bringing it back to local conservation is that that's how people tend to think, right? And it's very much like how we think about the Chesapeake Bay. Most people aren't thinking so much about the Chesapeake Bay and restoring that as a resource, and particularly difficult when you're talking about some of our states to the north, like Pennsylvania. But they do value their local streams, their local watersheds, and they want to see them protected and restored. And so by focusing on that local issue, land conservation, watershed restoration, you can get people involved, they become vested, and unbeknownst to them, they are actually helping with Chesapeake Bay restoration or climate change or with resiliency. I am one of those kids who benefited very much from having open space right behind my house. I grew up in Kings Park West in central Fairfax County and had Royal Lake Park right there. So my parents can attest to the fact that I spent much more time playing out in the woods than I did at home. But as much as I enjoyed that, it was also kind of a wake-up call for a younger learner, because whenever it rained, we saw the impacts of how we had developed and put in urban impervious surfaces. Because anytime there was a rainstorm, you would just have torrents of muddy water that would overwhelm Rabbit Branch. And so for me, that's kind of the stuff that engendered a passion for the environment and made me want to become an environmental planner as a profession. And so what drives me is I don't want to see us making the same mistakes that we have in the past. And so that comes down to tree conservation. It comes down to making sure that we've got really good zoning ordinances. We've got opportunities as we redevelop, but I also want to make sure that we're restoring the damage that we've done to our natural resources. And so it's not just about making sure that our future generations get to enjoy just these precious gems. It is all about our economy, right? And so our economy and natural resources are very much linked. And one of my favorite statistics is something that the Chesapeake Bay Foundation put together, that a restored Chesapeake Bay is worth about $22 billion more than what the Chesapeake Bay is worth now. So it's a great economic investment. Outdoor recreation is also huge. And so one of the things that I really love about the General Assembly is being able to co-chair our Outdoor Recreation Caucus. And again, it's a way to really focus on the fact that outdoor recreation, it's great, wonderful family time. During the pandemic, we've just gone on lots of hikes all throughout Virginia, but it's big business too, and it's good for our economy. I guess getting to the question in terms of outdoor recreation and parks, my district is really the poster child for these micro parks. I don't have really big ones. We've got Van Dyke Park. Most of our open spaces are the result of floodplain projects back during the 1970s. It was the PL 566 program, where you've got these dams that were put in to basically keep downstream developments from flooding out, just because of the density of development. And so it really is important that we focus on urban areas and preserving some of these natural resources that we have, and we're seeing them disappear very, very quickly. And so a lot of the green infrastructure that we have in my district, as in most of Northern Virginia, isn't actually protected. The reason that it's there is because it was sensitive, because it wasn't the best place to put development in the first place. But now, because of land use prices and because of development pressures, they now are getting developed as well. And that's not optimal. And so we really do need to make sure that we're focusing our resources and protecting these pocket parks for future generations. But again, I'm looking forward to the questions. And again, thank you so much for the trust for all that you do.
Appreciate that. Last but certainly not least, Delegate Guzman. We know that environmental justice is a really important issue for you. You certainly live in and around, and you have constituents in Prince William County where we're seeing some really significant and interesting land use challenges ahead. Welcome, Delegate Guzman, and maybe tell us a little bit about, why land conservation and land use is so important to you, and what and how do we deal with some of these really difficult decisions around land use planning that are going to affect our region for a long time?
Thank you, Alan. Hello, everyone. I am Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, and I proudly represent the 31st District, which includes parts of Prince William and Fauquier County. And I want to thank NVCT for hosting this event. It's always the event of the year that I would love to attend. So thank you for being virtually, and see you once again. So I think that the reason why I've made environmental protection a key focus of my work in the legislature, it's because that as a mother, an elected official, I don't want my children like 20 years from now tell me, Mom, you were in a position to do something to protect our environment and you have not done anything. So that's something that I like to take personally. I would like for them to enjoy the green areas and environment that we are enjoying today. So my children and grandchildren could enjoy that as well, and in that process, I've been able, for doing the right thing, I've been recognized for the job that I have been doing in the legislature to protecting the environment. I think many of us had gotten A+ ratings from the Sierra Club and the Virginia League of Conservation Voters. As recent as of last year, the Virginia League of Conservation Voters, gave me an award for House Bill 586, which was a study for PFOS and PFAS in major drinking water systems in Virginia that is currently underway as we speak. As far as my district, I represent Forest Park, the Independent Hill area, and I also have Fauquier County, as well. So it's interesting what's going on right now in Prince William County. I would tell you that by living for 2 decades in Prince William County, I have seen firsthand what development can do. It actually did it in part of my district in the Del City area, so we have to make sure that we find a balance, right? And what is the right balance? So I do believe, that I am not proud that 70% of my constituency in Prince William and Fauquier County had to commute, to Washington, D.C. for high-paying jobs. So I do believe in that. However, when we are making decisions about land use, it's extremely important that we get the buy-in from that constituency as we move forward. And what I heard from the people that I represent in the Independent Hill area is that they have not been part of the process or do not understand how it works, because by speaking with the County Board of Supervisors, what they explained to me, it makes sense. However, the bottom line here is that as we move forward, we have to find community consensus. And sometimes that is hard to do. I'm not gonna, lie, but I think as we move forward, we need to ensure, number one, that these jobs that we are going to create, are going to be green jobs. We have to make sure that we look at these issues through the lens of environmental justice. And that means that we have to ensure that people living there have some say in what's going on. People that have been there for decades and moved there for a reason, as we have heard, from many of my colleagues today, is that you want that privacy, you want it to be away from the hustle and bustle, of traffic. And, and they see that, they feel that they are threatened. So they need to be included in that conversation. So if we're going to create jobs, it's great, but we have to, many communities live in the county for a high-paying job. but there has to be the buy-in of the constituency. So when we think about protecting the environment, we need to think about jobs also. We need to make sure that those are well-paid trade union jobs, and we need to hold developers accountable to promote environmental justice in their building site. But most importantly, I think for us is that we need to ensure that access to clean water, clean air, and clean soil remains available. We need to know that Prince William County is ready to promote and use clean energy, technology, and practices so we can reduce pollution and save the environment. So I think the result of miscommunication is the cost of miscommunication could be too high. So we need to find a balance. We need creating jobs and protecting our green space. We need to unite our communities by boosting a clean energy economy. So while we are building, these centers, we need to promote environmental justice as well. So we need to have Prince William County residents involved in the process 100% of the time. And I think that in this case, I would like to recognize Fauquier County, where, they have done a very good job protecting their green areas. And how they do that, everything is by reaching out to the community. All of the decisions that the County Board of Supervisors make always through town halls. And this is not public hearings like the regular meetings that you have every week. So they are, town halls with an agenda that is specific to that issue. So constituents feel like they are listened and they agree to that, to what is happening. So, and that's what we are dealing with right now. I'm also proud to serve with Delegate Joshua Cole in the Rappahannock River Basin Commission. So we proudly represent our areas as our districts touch, the Rappahannock River. And we will continue, as we continue to serve the Commonwealth, continue to partner with you and many other organizations and my colleagues here to ensure that we are moving, to 100% renewables sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Guzman. I'd also like to welcome Delegate Vivian Watts, another great champion for the environment. Glad that you are with us. We've got lots of great questions from the crowd. Probably have, 15 to 20 minutes to get to them, as many of them as we can. So I guess I would call this the rapid fire round. But I do want to start with one that, and I think I'll direct this to Senator Marsden and Delegate Bulova, but others can answer it as well. I mean, we saw on a national level in 2020, even, during the Trump administration, that dedicated land conservation funding can pass the United States Congress and the United States Senate. $900 million dedicated annually to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is essentially the national land acquisition campaign. Dollars that can be used for, federal parks, but also for a state program. I think it's clear that $10 million in VLCF funding annually is not enough. It's certainly not enough to support Northern Virginia projects, which, as many of you have said, even small pocket park expansion opportunities are going to cost, a quarter to a third to half of the entire state's budget for LWCF. So in asking Delegate Bulova and Senator Marsden this, and others can answer as well, how do we work towards dedicated funding for land conservation in a way that provides some certainty for, being able to acquire and build parks, and that we know doesn't necessarily have to go through the ups and downs of the appropriations process, which has now been done at the federal level.
Dave, do you want to join, or I could certainly go ahead and weigh in? And so, I think Alan, as you had pointed out, this is not a partisan issue when it comes to land conservation. And so I had mentioned the fact that I was the co-chair of the Outdoor Recreation Caucus, and my other co-chair is Senator Emmett Hanger from out in the Shenandoah Valley, and so he's equally as passionate about making sure that we save and conserve our land resources for future generations. You're right. We do need to come up with additional funding in order to be able to protect these resources, and we need to be able to do that in a timely manner, because if we don't, a lot of them will go ahead and succumb to land development pressures. I think right now, we do have some neat opportunities to get some win-wins where in terms of how we go ahead and prioritize these things. And so, for instance, we have two plans that we're trying to implement right now. So one is that Wildlife Corridor Action Plan that you went ahead and mentioned at the beginning. And that is how do we re-link up our wildlife corridors? And that's not only great for wildlife, but it also make sure that people avoid hitting animals, which is bad for the animals, but also very expensive. We're also working to meeting our Chesapeake Bay restoration goals by 2025, and a big part of that is land conservation and riparian stream buffers, and how do we preserve that as much as possible. So I really do think by making sure that we pull all those together and that we understand the nexus among those different kind of issues, we have a unique opportunity moving forward in order to be able to increase the resources that goes towards land conservation. And especially, with some of that federal funding and our own coastal resilience funding, and again, coastal resilience and flood resilience, a lot of that is about protecting our local wetlands and protecting our local floodplains. So, agree that that needs to be a priority coming up in the next couple sessions, and that now is a great time to focus on that effort.
Senator Marsden, as someone on the VLCF board, it's another way of asking this question. I mean, we obviously saw a number of budget amendments to fund land conservation, including River Farm in the last session. Should we be funding VLCF higher to meet those needs, or is it a normal progression of things and fine if more and more budget amendments are asked for every year that fund individual projects in the way that River Farm was, that Chickahominy was attempted to do? What's the balance there for VLCF in your mind?
Senator, you're on mute.
Thank you. That's the $64 question. We've we put money into the conservation of land as the budget allows, and as some of you may know, the General Assembly every year in the budget it trumps any other kind of funding decisions we make in the law. In other words, if you set that a certain amount of money is going to come out of a certain source for this particular purpose and what have you, that can be undone by the budget. We have good years and bad years, but we unlike the federal government, we can't print money, and we have to live within our means. And the question is, what are the priorities? For me, I tend to want to focus on conservation of land projects adjacent to streams and rivers that will serve a dual purpose. It preserves the land. It provides some opportunity for a thoughtful recreation, and lastly, it filters water in ways that keeps pollution, especially nitrogen pollution, out of our waterways. And it is a staggering problem to try to deal with. And the only way we can deal with it is a little bit at a time. Do we need a dedicated fund, and do we need more money placed into conservation recreation? Absolutely, because it solves so many problems, for us, and we will never get these properties back. Some of the things that occur in our more urban suburban areas are a little trickier. But we have situations where people donate land to us for parks, and we don't have the money to staff them to create the park based on the gift that's been given to us. So it is an enormous problem, and we have gone about it, I think, responsibly. But do we need more money? Absolutely, to be able to preserve more of these land, or in many cases for the state to outright purchase some of these lands for our future needs.
Hey, Alan, can you give me 60 seconds?
60 seconds.
Let me say, I think the land conservation tax credit is a huge tool that we need to be able to use. I know we're talking about using it for the purchase of River Farm. I think we could probably get about $3 million of the price of River Farm knocked out using that conservation tax credit, which it being syndicatable where you can purchase it or sell it, provides the flexibility that's really necessary. I think that's another tool in addition to straight cash that we need to make sure is always available to provide that flexibility.
Alan, and if I may speak to the
Yes.
conservation tax credit, as a longtime member of the Finance Committee of the TAC, which is the tax writing, and now chair. So we've got some real issues that have been there from the beginning, where they're just, while it has been tremendously successful in preserving large expanse of land and view sheds throughout the Commonwealth, more so than many other states. We have had a problem from the beginning in recognizing the urban criticality of, I'm thinking of the beginning, Salona, for example, in that instance, but also always the Stream Valley issues of those critical acre or two in urban areas. And that in the scrutiny of the conservation tax credit, because of the amount of revenue that is diverted to it, that particularly, not talking about the current net panelists, but where the Senate significantly wanted to cut back, and we've had to put in significant scrutiny. Well, that scrutiny and standards need to be re-examined, or we won't be able to get the investment in the urban areas that we need, that are so critical, not only for the view sheds, and I have been on almost from the beginning, so I appreciate all the Potomac view shed issues, but also absolutely Stream Valley. One other thing while I'm speaking, even though I know it's rapid fire, stream restoration. The cost of it is huge. I happen to have been impacted by a $2 million project that dealt with less than a mile of headwater Stream Valley. And so I'm not only emphasizing the cost of that, but also for public acceptance, the loss of mature trees from 12 inches in diameter to 3 foot in diameter that far exceeded what the hydraulic engineers had said would happen, is very important, not only for the importance of the tree canopy, but also for for community acceptance, given that much of the stream restoration is going to involve private land. So I also emphasize that as a cost factor, as well as how do we move this critical preservation.
Appreciate that very much. I want to get Delegate Cole in here. The issue of dedicated funding for conservation is certainly one that I think needs to be addressed, so that places like Crow's Nest and others in your district, we have an opportunity to really enhance and finish that vision. But bigger picture, how do you see your own leadership, continuing within the Assembly in terms of moving legislation and working with colleagues to, bring more of that investment to bear?
Thanks for that question, Alan. I think it's very important. I think that's one of the reasons why we have, over 140 members of the General Assembly in the Senate and in the House, for those of us in our districts to come down to Richmond and to share with our colleagues the importance of why Crow's Nest needs to be protected, or some of the other areas that we have in Stafford County and the city of Fredericksburg, and raise the importance of making sure that funding is diverted in our areas. And I think, we've had so many of my colleagues who talked about, who bragged about the great spaces that they have in their district. That's our job. When we get down to Richmond, we brag about the great places that we have, the great spaces that we have, and why our district needs that money. Someone who's not on the Appropriations Committee, it's my job to lobby my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee and say, hey, we need this funding because we need to increase funding here because. And so I think that's really our job as legislators when we go down to Richmond. Of course, we're fighting for the entire Commonwealth, law. But sometimes it's all right to get a little selfish about your district and make sure that your friends and colleagues on the committees that you may not serve on, but help you out, understand the importance of why you need to get the resources to where you are as well.
He does a good job of that. I can attest to that.
Well, and expanding on that, maybe I'll go to Delegate Tran. I mean, you know, Northern Virginia is very unique among the legislature, and it isn't always easy for Northern Virginia issues to get their day. And it costs a lot more money to do things here. There can often be a perception that because these are, you know, quotes, rich counties or otherwise, that we don't need some of this investment. It's been difficult at times, I think, for Northern Virginia to compete with the rest of the state for resources in this way. You know, is it the way Delegate Cole, you know, talked about? Is that how we change it, or are there other ways in which we need to marry up and link up with, you know, the Richmond surrounding area, the Hampton Roads, you know, Newport News area, and really look at connections to some of those, you know, exurban, suburban communities?
Ellen, excellent question. And this issue applies not just about conservation, but almost any other issue that we deal with, education funding or community-based healthcare funding and more. But I think it's both, right? It's both helping us. We need to do a really good job telling our story. And I think people are mistaken when they think that we are, you know, uniformly a wealthy area that has all the resources we need. And I think we have to be able to better illustrate where our pockets of needs are and what that looks like, but also how, and then I think the other piece is helping to bridge with other areas in Virginia, whether they're more of our rural colleagues or more of our other urban areas, about how we have similar issues. So I just want to point out one, and I know this is an issue that Senator Serval and I are working on a very particular issue in the precinct we cross over. But like, we have roads and bridges that flood and are not passable, right? But otherwise they're in pretty good condition. And that issue is an issue that so many other communities in Virginia face. And so when we lift up what our concerns are, if we're able to link it to how other communities in Virginia that our General Assembly members are representing, how we have some of these commonalities, then we can build some pretty unusual alliances, I think. But I think that it's a both. But I had also raised my hand because as I have some of my appropriations colleagues on the line here, I just want to plug something for them as well related to conservation. We had a bill this year that passed studying how do we best support and fund our state parks, which are only partially funded at the state level, but then rely so much on the revenue that they bring in. And so it's a really uneven it's hard to predict how much support they're going to need and support that they're going to get in, right? And so there's a bill that we passed to study what is the best way for us to fund and support our state parks across the board. So that might take some additional investments from the state to be able to do that, but to make sure that our parks have a more even, right, funding and resources so that they can depend on and plan appropriately, whether it's for staff or for programming and such. So I just want to put that plug in. I know we're not focused entirely on state parks today, but when I have the ear of my appropriations colleagues, I always try to bend it.
And Alan, if I could just join in really quickly, that Kathy's going to have her dream come true, because one of the things that we have been coordinating among Senate and House appropriations staff is to have some kind of get together in the off session so that we can really look at prioritization and what do we want our system to look like over the next couple of decades. And it is hard under the pressure of a particular session to prioritize and decide, you know, what you want to fund over others. And so we're hoping to have a chance to step back and really make sense of what are our needs and where do we want to go.
That's great. I'm going to start with Delegate Guzman on this one, but we'll open it up to others. I think the other aspect of this that I'm interested in hearing from some of the panelists on is, you know, how we make sure that this environmental movement and our, you know, building healthy and sustainable communities is realized by all of our constituents. And, you know, there is, you know, I think the environmental community has struggled at times with how to, you know, bring diversity, equity, and inclusion to our work. And many of you represent districts that, you know, really run the gamut between, you know, more dense, you know, apartment, you know, condo communities and, you know, neighborhoods with larger single family homes. How do we best bring this message and bring to bear those constituents who, you know, benefit greatly from parks and open space, and maybe even need it more as a result of living, you know, in our more dense areas that are becoming harder and harder to afford every day. You know, Delegate Guzman, I'll start with you. What is that nexus between, you know, affordable housing and conservation, and how are we making sure that we're serving all of our community as we think about a growing park and natural resource infrastructure?
Well, thank you for the question, Alan. Actually, you know, I introduced some past legislation a couple of years ago to start having these conversations, which is wherever localities, when they are doing their planning, 5-year, 10-year planning, they start having these conversations about protecting the environment while they are bringing public transportation, while they are bringing affordable housing. So it is the law now, and localities are actually, you know, doing it. Any locality, city that has more than 20,000 residents, or counties with more than 100,000 residents, have to include this as part of their conversation. But I think that sometimes when we're talking about climate change, and we're talking about also communities of color, we have to create a lot of education and awareness, you know, and sometimes sharing with them the consequences of not protecting the environment, what is going to happen, is extremely, extremely important. You know, and I think we have to do more, and we have to do it in multiple languages as our Commonwealth is becoming extremely diverse. And as an immigrant myself, I could tell you that sometimes, you know, you come to the States and you think, well, leading nation, protecting the environment is going to be, you know, #1 priority. And then you get here and you are like, oh, we still have ways to go. You know, there's still, we have to do more education. And sometimes it is not about not wanting to do it, but at the same time are the struggles of our constituency, that many of them, to live in a community where the cost of living is so high, and we are dragging our feet on increasing the minimum wage. We do represent individuals who have 2 jobs or 3 jobs to make ends meet. So what priority is going to be for them to do recycling or protecting the environment? So all of those are connected to each other. So I think, to your question, moving forward, as we are reaching to 100% renewables once again, and it has to be before 2035, and I hope we could agree on that. You know, we have to have these conversations about moving forward, educating, protecting the environment, and, you know, declaring, we have a very good opportunity in Virginia to declare that there is a climate emergency, and we could be the leading state in the nation to do that if we agree to go in and agree on to share that with our constituency and the residents of the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Senator Servo, you raised your hand, I know.
Yeah, Alan, could I just say, so in areas like Northern Virginia, where I think this comes into play, is the intersection of land use and transportation. So if you look at what we're doing over in eastern Fairfax County, where we have Route 1, which was built out between, like, you know, 1940 and 1970, where we have this all this old outdated infrastructure, these concrete drainage ditches. We took all of our streams and stuck them in stormwater pipes so you can't see them anymore. With the new rezoning the county just did to follow on to the state's multimodal transit study we did, where we're going to build make $1 billion investment in bus rapid transit and a metro extension. The county came and redid the zoning plan and said, you know what, let's daylight all these streams. Let's take what we put underground and open it back up to the public and connect all these communities once again with walking trails along the streams, with bike paths that connect and interconnect between parcels, with sidewalks so you can get from one neighborhood to another without going around a chain link fence and having to walk way back out onto Route 1 and put your self at risk out in traffic. I think walkable, livable communities that are in touch with nature is where our future lies. And I think that the key to encouraging that type of development is making major investments in transit so that people get out of their cars and we don't have to spend so much money on asphalt for parking lots, and we have people, you know, investing in bicycles instead. So or walking to a transit station. So I think that's where the future is in areas like ours, and I think that's what you're going to see more of going forward.
Delegate Krizek and then Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, I just wanted to also follow up. We did pass a bill creating the Interagency Environmental Justice Working Group, and that is an advisory council in the executive branch to further environmental justice. So I think that is a good start as well, and builds on the legislation that Delegate Guzman had passed a few years ago. So we are very cognizant of that and very aware. And I also want to say there's been regarding and I think a part of that is how we treat our native population, the American Indians, our tribes. We did just, Delegate Tran mentioned our wonderful park system. We have 40 state parks. The newest one just came online, Machicomoco, and that park was the process of developing that park included working with local tribes, and especially the Chickahominy and I think even the Pamunkey, but they have their input was very valuable and a major part of that, and they were involved in the grand opening about a month or so ago. And Senator Marsden mentioned the land, the money that I think it was 3.5 million that the Chickahominy got in the budget this year. And again, it was kind of like an earmark, which isn't the best way to do it. And a bill that I presented last year didn't go anywhere yet, but I'm going to keep fighting for it, is a tribal land repatriation fund. And I think that will go a long way towards environmental justice as well.
Great. Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Alan, and my apologies. I probably had my hand up from before, but addressing the issue of transportation, and then I'll take my hand down, but addressing the issue of transportation, that's a huge, huge issue. Obviously, ultimately, the fewer vehicles with more people in them, transit of all kinds, HOV of all kinds, et cetera, the better. But as far as local action on what we are talking about in all of the ramifications of stream restoration, view shed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we really need to get back to really emphasizing cluster zoning from my experience, so that you are not only are you preserving through not flattening the ground, the areas where you can retain the water runoff so that you don't disturb the permeability of that soil as well, but you're also giving the residents, just like David Bulova just talked about his childhood, the opportunity to experience a little bit of nature and begin to realize the importance in their own half acre or 1/3 acre, if you're going to cluster zone lot, of creating the rain barrel and the surfaces that aren't rolled over and constantly fertilized, and all of those other consciousness. Because from my experience, while what I said about transportation on the macro level has to be dealt with, much of the rest of the challenge is all on the micro level. And so this is where I really see our transportation patterns having to change because of the way in which we do land use. But to do that, then we've got to do even more as far as collection points for transit, and as well as, of course, trails and bikes and all of the other things.
Great. There's so many great questions here. We're not going to get to them all. I think what we're going to do is end up actually asking many of the panelists to answer some of those questions in writing, and we're going to post them because there are some really good ones here. I do want to close with asking a number of you, and we'll start with Delegate Tran. There's a lot of advocates on this call. There's a lot of people really passionate about the environment. This past year, and certainly this past legislative session was different than any you all have been a part of. It's more difficult for many people now to feel like they have access to you, to see you in person. Maybe that's going to be changing a little bit more as the world opens up. But how can people, be connected to you, feel like they, can have their questions and concerns answered, and theoretically, as we're coming out of a pandemic world, how do we get back to where so many of these individual issues that play out on an everyday basis, get a hearing with you, and that we're able to look at them for the opportunities that they are. And I'll start with Delegate Tran, but others can answer as well.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of issues with my video right now, but so, I know it's been such an unusual and challenging times, and it's different because we don't get to see each other in person, although I think that is going to, we're just around the bend from that changing. But, and I know my colleagues too, we've just tried to be as accessible as possible. Delegate Watts, Delegate Krizik, and I, as well as Delegate Mark Sickles, call ourselves kind of like the South County House delegation. And we have had at least like 5 or 6 town halls together. And then I've just participated in numerous other ones by myself or with other colleagues. I cross over also with Senator Marsden, and as I said, Senator Serval. And so we've had a number of town halls, and I'm still having, office hours or meetings one-on-one with constituents right now. So I would really encourage anybody to reach out to your representative and to set up a meeting. And now is really the time because we're not in session. So we're able to catch our breath and delve more deeply into issues and figure out, what is the policy solution that needs to be put on the table, and how do we bring the right stakeholders together for that conversation. And so I really encourage everybody to do it. And if you have specific ideas, or you just have a question in mind and you want to like nibble around on it and figure out what the best path forward is, but please do reach out. And I think even though it's harder, we feel like the sense of loss of not being in person together, the technology has made it so that I think we're able to have more back-to-back meetings. So it seems like we are actually engaging with lots more folks this way. But I definitely think I encourage everybody to reach out and to have that virtual coffee or in person when it's available. We're all very much all ears and wanting to be good partners and good stewards and in this conversation.
That's great. I appreciate that very much. I want to thank our panelists. There are so many good questions in the chat here. We could do this for another hour more, but I want to be respectful of their time. Your questions, though, for those of you, who have been listening in, do matter, and we are going to get them answered for you, every single one of them. So I will be sending to the panelists a series of these questions, asking them to respond, and we will provide those back to you, as well as post them online along with this entire recording. So with that, I'd like to turn it over again to our board chair, Ranjit Singh, to close us out. I want to thank again all of the attendees and the panelists, as well as our sponsors, and looking forward to really continuing this conversation with so many of you. We are lucky to have you in Northern Virginia, and in sort of preaching to the choir today with so many of you about how the environment matters. We clearly need to just, be bringing it out to more and more both stakeholders and decision makers, because that's how this is going to work moving forward. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate all the great questions we've had, and we're gonna be answering them. So I will turn it over now to Ranjit Singh.
Thanks, Alan. This has been wonderful. Before we close, I just want to take a moment to ask you to please support the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. I think, as you've heard a number of times in our dialogue today, we are your local land trust, working every day to protect the lands, the waters, and the scenic beauty of Northern Virginia. Your donations directly contribute to developing healthy, sustainable communities for ourselves and for future generations. So if you enjoyed today's conversation and want to support projects like River Farm and many, many others, please go to nvct.org and make a gift right now. Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.
And we are going to close today with a video that I hope helps bring all this together and is something, you know, that really shows a lot about hopefully the way that we do our work and the way that we want to partner with each of you moving forward. Working to do conservation in Northern Virginia is challenging, but we've had a lot of success, and our panelists have had a big role in that. And so we want to close with a video that I think, you know, tells the story of why this work really matters on a personal level.
"25 years from now, everybody in our region, in the Northern Virginia region, is able to have easy access to a place like this. Quiet, like we have on this morning here, and where their kids can go fishing.
I would hope for generations to come, this property will be a little oasis for animals, plants, pollinators, and people.
When we look back 25 years from now, we can take pride in the fact that we preserve properties that our kids and the birdies and bunnies and people who like to walk their dogs, when they walk out of the house in the morning, are able to see where we came from.
People come to conservation for a lot of different purposes, a lot of different motivations, and I can definitely say that mine is because of an emotional bond that I developed as a kid to a very specific piece of land, and that's this Crow's Nest Peninsula here. NVCT had been a very early mover on the effort to save Crow's Nest. 20 years ago, the NVCT placed an easement on 70 acres of Crow's Nest heron rookery, which is one of the largest rookeries on the East Coast. I think everybody who lives around here sees the herons come and go, and it's become kind of almost a county, a flag of the county here. We know that the effort to truly preserve Crow's Nest is not complete yet. And there are a number of threats to Crow's Nest. There are large, contiguous areas under threat of development. There's always pressure. That's the story of Northern Virginia. The NVCT is working very actively to ensure that the integrity of the nature preserve here is maintained 20, 50 years from now, even 100 years from now.
This farm was actually the oldest continuously farmed farm in western Loudoun County from the original descendants.
We love the idea of it being a family farm, of it being a place where our children can grow up in the outdoors. Seeing the kids playing with the animals, doing the chores, learning the work ethic that we are attempting to instill in them that will benefit them for a lifetime, all just contributes to confirming that it was the right decision for us to purchase the farm. Loudoun County in general is experiencing a tremendous amount of population growth especially, and pressures to develop.
Northern Virginia Conservation Trust is a great advocate for the rural side of Western Loudoun, for the small families farms, and how vital it is to thoughtfully protect some of these areas so that we don't lose the very character that made this county what it is for centuries.
One of the things that surprised me and that gratified me about working with NVCT was that the size of my land was not an impediment to a conservation easement. I have less than an acre. However, let's be realistic. In the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, we're not going to get big, huge patches until we get further out. And my message, you can take 1/4 of an acre and make it wildlife friendly.
We are in an urgent time where every day that we're not able to protect new public lands, we're losing places that we probably will have lost forever. That means that we need more resources, we need more support and more partnerships in order to succeed in the next 25 years. Thank you all for being with us today. We appreciate all of your support.